Welcome to Southside Korero. Again, my name is Otara Vaccination. Welcome back. But we will be talking to Aayla Pebbles, who's been my mentor as well as an amazing human being to those in MIT as well as our Otara community, who's given a lot based in just helping our students out in terms of their studies and education, and just giving an insight of what she did throughout the 2 years that she was 3 years technically with me at MIT in terms of COVID response as well as just overall awesomeness. I think her stories are amazing, and I hope you enjoy the stories that have been shared throughout the podcast and just everything in between. My name is Otara Vaccination once again. I hope you enjoy Southside Korero.
Kia ora, everyone.
So, Aayla, like I said, at the start of this, you're my mentor, basically. We went through 3 amazing years working with MIT Student Council, and then went on to just awesome things. So I know that we worked on with MIT in terms of the response in COVID. What were your first thoughts when March 22nd happened? If you remembered, that first time going into lockdown.
Well, first off, I just want to say thank you. I am very flattered that you consider me, as a mentor. It was 3 wonderful years together. And, one thing I really love about you, Vinnie, is you've got a massive heart for our community. And it's obvious, you doing this podcast and trying to get some, information out to our community and support the COVID response. So thank you. It's very much appreciated. The COVID, what did I think on day one? Yeah, actually, I'm a bit of a scaredy cat. So I immediately assumed the worst. So when they said that there was an outbreak and a pandemic and, the COVID thing, I immediately thought of Ebola, and measles and, all these
horrible pictures. Yeah, absolutely.
All these diseases that have sort of popped up in the last few years in my lifetime. And so I immediately thought the worst. So, yeah, and then it's sort of come to fruition over the last couple of years, with more and more people getting ill and dying. And so probably not as bad as Ebola and measles, but, definitely not a good disease to have around in the community.
Absolutely. It still has the same devastating effects when it did roll out, especially we're still facing those ongoing things, especially like measles. We still have those drives for people to basically go out to get the vaccines and whatnot. So that's important. We'll come back to the vaccine things later and talk about your experience. But I wanna ask that amazing response by MIT. Like the first thing was that, as a true leader, Gus Gilmore throwing those emails out to students and to reassure them to not be afraid. I know for a fact when I read that email from him, it was a beautiful email at that time. So if you don't mind, if we can go through like some of the stuff that the MIT went with students, because I was talking to Micah Cecily, our current president here at MIT. If you don't mind sharing some of the initiatives that not only the council went through, but MIT alone went through in terms of keeping our students aware and up to date and safe, as well as their teaching.
Cool. Yeah, I must commend MIT, good old MIT for their response to this whole COVID situation. In the early days, I think they got a lot of feedback from our learners, especially our student leaders, saying, we need, more timely information. It needs to be, more reflective of our value manaakitanga, and, they had a lot to say. And so I appreciate that MIT leadership took that on board, and they have now sort of formulated a response that is more inclusive of learners or students. So I don't know, maybe Micah mentioned in her episode, she's actually part of the COVID response team for MIT. So they've got the ground level view, speaking to the decision-making forums. And so, as you said, a lot of our comms that come through Godgas are, again, more of sort of reflective of our values, but also more relevant to our learners and community. And to be honest, we still have room for improvement as well. But yeah, I love that they are including students in their decision making. A couple of the maybe cool initiatives that I have appreciated during my time at MIT. One of them is I think it's so great to see the community really rally around. So, it's not just MIT, but it's all about Otara and our South Auckland communities. And
absolutely.
So there have been all these wonderful organisations and groups that have popped up, to deliver food parcels, support people with travel to, testing or vaccinations, people really rallying together for those that are, most in need. So that's become very apparent to me. And I love MIT and I love our South Auckland community for that. And then one of the cool things that we sort of drove internally was an outreach project, which we called We Care. Basically, we identified our most at-risk learners or students who aren't able to sort of engage in the online learning. We know in South Auckland that many of our peoples don't have access to technology. It's a luxury. So there's been a good response in terms of us, in partnership with the government is, trying to, get devices out to students and help to, get them support, financial support that they need. So there was 25 people from across our organisation in all different departments, which you'll appreciate, even people from property and campus and, HR, and they all came together and I think we called almost about 1,000 students that were deemed at risk or hadn't participated in online learning. We called them, and more so just a well-being check-in. How are you going? How's your whānau? Checking in on the hauora and their well-being. So check in. How are you doing? How are you going with online learning? If you're not, do you need technology? Are you going through hardship? Do you need, support to learn how to use technology? All those sorts of things. So we asked them a whole lot of questions, and then in the back end, all our master. Master mahi, or I think we call them master mahi people, they were in the back then triaging that support. So if a learner or student identified they needed technology or they needed to learn how to use technology, we would then refer them to the right person, and that person would then contact them and give them that support they needed. So it was really proactive, very, very caring project, and it was just nice to get out and, and hear from our students and and connect with them. So it's only a couple of examples that I could think of. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I mean, like the We Care was such a huge project, and it from when I was the vice president last year, I saw it just like kick off from the ground. It was something that was built like from bare scraps, because we'd never been in this sort of situation. If you think about it, over the 10, 20 odd years, you never actually dreamed of something that would hit our shores so quickly and so effectively. But then to see so much like aroha, so much love and care that went into We Care, from the both student side to staff side, like I've never seen so much beautiful collaboration into one cohort that went into students, and it's still going strong from my understanding, right? From going into this year, it's just seeing it just flourish from something that, okay, let's see what we can provide for our students. Okay, the government's providing this. Let's regulate it as much as we can. And I commend your team for doing that, as well as everyone else in that team. I know that you
one
run
of the things I appreciated, Vinnie, is as I mentioned, the 25 people that came from across the organisation. So many of us hadn't worked together before, and some people sort of work in the more sort of back house admin space, but it brought a real sense of community between us. And so I think so often we get caught up in our jobs and the detail of our jobs, we forget about the purpose of why we're here. And so I think it just sort of reinforced our purpose. We are here to serve, our South Auckland community and to lift the educational outcomes for our people. So it's definitely created, sort of started to, I don't know, like to say that's starting to infiltrate our culture, and so there's more sort of a sense of community now sort of being brewed.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's the right word, brewed at MIT.
It's definitely stirring, and it's a good thing. It's a lot of good aspects is brought into the pot and just being created. Going back to to the discussion of just bringing the ability to give an opportunity for students to basically be a part of the learning. So we're now into our second year, and we're already into our our 50 billionth lockdown currently. So what do you think is needed in our community to keep up with that, the whole initiative, and keep it alive? Because I noticed that there are some sort of cutbacks, because I talked to Micah about some cutbacks that have happened. And what are your thoughts of what can our community do to keep those initiatives alive?
So do you mean post-COVID or?
Oh, even post-COVID, absolutely. During COVID as well. Because it's sort of just where does this allocation of resources need to go? So because we're in a situation where we have a community, there's a lot of needs, but where do we put them in these certain squares? So, in your opinion of working in this amazing field and seeing a lot of amazing things, where do you think these certain things need to go?
Okay, sorry. Okay. Wait, sorry, Vinnie, can you ask me that question one more time? Sorry.
No, you're all right. You're all right. So, given that, given that a lot of initiative has happened throughout the 2 years, what is your opinion on keeping those initiatives alive? So to ensure that post-COVID, that we still got those backbone of all these initiatives to keep not only our students' support good and healthy, as well as our community. So what do you think needs to be done to keep it going?
Okay, so I suppose, with all this COVID, it's sort of going back to my point around sort of creating those communities. So, one of the things I've noticed is that we already have a lot of great stuff. We already have a lot of, cool, community organizations, whether they be, food banks or, youth organizations, or there's a few others, and sort of church organizations, and I suppose COVID happenings helps to bring all of that together, and so organizations like ourselves, MIT and, our local Otara community, we've all, really sort of put our heads and our resources, our talents, our relationships and our networks, all together. And I think that's sort of what's amplified the support within our community, is that we are now sort of being more of a community. We are more sort of in a collective space. So again, I suppose it comes back to the purpose, when something like this, something terrible like COVID happens, people are brought back to the purpose, and we rally and we do stuff together, and and we support those that are in most in need. So I suppose going, as we continue on through COVID and even after COVID, it would be good for us to sort of continue that collective approach.
Absolutely.
Sorry, did I answer that?
No,
Sorry,
that's beautiful. That's the sort of answers that we want to hear, because there's uncertainties and when we do hear messages, even from hearing our own Prime Minister Jacinta, our community doesn't understand what's going on out there. Many times it's either like blowing over our heads, or we just don't to have grassroots content, but it's beautiful to hear someone who's in the area who understands it and just be able to beautifully break it down. So again, thank you so much for doing that. It's good.
Oh, thanks, Vinnie.
Made me feel better. So I love that explanation, and I love that explanation. Let's go to the breast tax, as I like to say. Going into a community like South Auckland, we are very quite close together in terms of our beliefs, and culture-wise, and especially religious-wise. But in terms of education and educating ourselves, what do you see in the near future for our community in terms of vaccines? And how could someone like MIT or my organization, Exerani Aotearoa, what are tools that we can use to basically educate our people about vaccines? What are your thoughts in that, of how we can educate our people?
Yeah, I think it is. It's quite a controversial topic, this one, Vinnie. And I don't think there is any right or wrong answers. I think vaccines, the choice to be vaccinated comes down to personal choice and like you said, like your beliefs. I'm a believer of the vaccinations, and I was on the fence for quite a while up until recently. So I've got my first jab, but. Especially on social media. So my family, friends, and community, they are quite divided. So I sort of have half of my whānau that are pro-vax, or they're into it. And then I have those that are anti-vax, and there's a lot of sort of, I think there's skeptics because, well, one, people think it was created at, speed, and then they're not too sure if they trust it. Two, I think, the fact that it's sort of starting to become sort of more enforced now through our governments. And I think another thing to note there is that there is already, especially in the Māori Pacifica space, there is already a mistrust towards the Crown and government relations. So, and that's not anything that the current government have done. I think Jacinda's done a great job. But and historically, we think about Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and then all the things that sort of happened with Māori, and then we think about the Dawn raids. Those sorts of things have created a relationship between communities and government where we're not really on par, and so. Sometimes I think it's not even about vaccinations. It's more about, the approaches or the instructions from government. So, yeah. But I take it from I've been looking around. I've been doing my research. My friends have been telling me, look at this, look at that. So, one of the things I think is when you're making an informed decision, you have to think critically. You can't just look at a piece of information and say, oh, that's right. You have to go looking around at lots of different bits of information and then make your decision based on those conclusions. So I sort of looked at it. The selling point for me was, my doctor encouraging it, and all the health professionals that I know, doctors, nurses, healthcare assistants, they're encouraging it. And I think about vaccinations in general, I think there's about 15 on the New Zealand vaccination schedule, and I've had all of my vaccinations. All my children have had their vaccinations, and we are safe, we are healthy, and we are protected from those diseases. And I think also too with the measles outbreak that we had a couple of years ago with where they killed lots of children in Samoa. I know the impact and how deadly these viruses can be. So we have had all our vaccinations, and we're fine, and I think that based on the track record of the New Zealand medical system, and these doctors who spend more than 10 years in study, I think that it qualifies their encouragement to get the vaccination. So basically my decision was based on my trust in the New Zealand medical system, which I think has served us very well. Definitely me and my whānau in the many, many years we've been around. and another I'll share with you another
Oh, absolutely.
thing is one time my cousin, she was so she had a baby, and we went up to see her, and she experienced a sort of like a life or death moment where she became really unwell, and I remember being in the room, and everything happened really quickly, and there was a lot of blood, and she was and they had to rush her to theatre. And I just remember there was about 10 medical staff. When the red button got pushed, there were doctors, nurses, and anaesthetists, everybody in the room within a few minutes, and they had her prepared and ready to go, to theatre, and they saved her life. They worked on her tirelessly and diligently, and she was very unwell for a while, but she's still here with us today. And so I think about that situation, or that example, where I know that I can put trust in the New Zealand medical system. So yeah, that's just one of my experiences.
It's cool. And thank you so much for sharing something that's very intimate. To that story is just a way, shows a little lens in what possibilities of the medical field can do, and it's important that people see that lens, because it's a big one, especially in terms of just how things have gone through in terms of vaccines and whatnot. The gentleman who created penicillin had, if you heard, basically gave the patent for free because he wanted to ensure that everyone was healthy. Everyone that was suffering a lot of these common diseases were able to continue their life. So when you hear vaccines and the after effects or effects or whatnot, it's important to go back to that research. And again, thank you so much for sharing your methods of research and whatnot. My next question was to ask you about your shot and how it went. Did you go with a buddy, pretty much, and was it a daunting thing?
Yeah, no, I went with my partner, and once it became sort of more of a local thing, then we were into it. To be honest, when they had their whole mass vaccination thing, I wasn't keen. Just I'm not going to say it, but it felt, no, I shouldn't say it. But yeah, it's like lambs to the slaughter. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the word mass, I think that's what it was. If they had just called it community vaccination, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. But yeah, so but then of course they took a more local approach. So then, medical centres, doctors and chemists were doing it. So so we just sort of timed it with our normal grocery shop. Me and my partner went down. There's a little chemist in Manukau next to Countdown, and we just went there, and there was nobody there. It was just us two. We walked in, they had it all signposted, and they had a system where you sort of sat on entry, and then you sort of sat after you had your vaccination. But they were really friendly, very professional. And it was over within a matter of minutes. But yeah, no, I was quite surprised at how painless it was. I'm a bit of a scaredy cat when it comes to needles, so I had feared for the worst, but it wasn't anywhere as bad as I had anticipated. So it was good. It was good.
Fair enough. I had to go with my boss. Her name is Judy. So it's funny because I'm talking to you. You were my boss, and to hear that. So me and my boss met as buddies to get our first injection, and it was that she did have that fear of needles and whatnot, and the uncertainty. But what we did, and I mentioned this in multiple podcasts, is that we talked to each other, and it's really good to know that the buddy system actually works. So it's a good thing that you bring your buddy and your friends to come off of vaccinations, and it makes the process so easy. And like I talked to Micah about her student nurses going into vaccine spots. That was such an amazing thing to hear. Our wonderful students who are going out there to serve the community, to help out with vaccination spots, was beautiful. So we're coming up to our final two questions. So my second to last question. Sorry, I can't count. Sorry. What are your 3 golden rules?
It's okay.
What are your 3 golden rules during these times of hardship during lockdown? I know that you gave me words of wisdom, and it's still makes me tear up when I think about it, because you're such an amazing person, and I know you have words of wisdom that you always share to our students, that you share to us members of student council. What are the golden three, since we've gone through 2 years of lockdown and COVID, what are the three golden rules that you want to share to our community?
I think my first one would be, don't be too hard on yourself. You know, oh, hold on. Especially, you know, like with like working, and I mean, I've got sort of kids at home, and they're supposed to be learning, and you know, just trying to balance that, and the ongoing housework. You know, it's twice as much housework when you actually live in it. You know, housework, mum duties. I'm supposed to be a full-time teacher and maintain a full-time job, and so very quickly I can start to sort of, I almost like develop anxiety around all the things that I need to do or I haven't done. Where I might work, you know, 5 days straight and not pay a whole lot of attention to my children's learning, I then feel guilty that I'm not as engaged, you know. And then if I engage in their learning too much, then I feel like I'm not getting my tasks done at work. But you know, at the end of the day, it's not necessarily about you know, fulfilling everybody's, you know, wishes, or you know, I think it's more like the pressure of society, you know, is like, you know, make sure that you're working and you're productive, and make sure that your child is learning and they're up to, you know, the national standards. And it's just like, you know, this whole COVID thing has impacted everybody, and we've got to give ourselves some leniency.
Absolutely.
So I try to now take notes of things that I do. Yeah, and so cleaned out linen cupboard, tick, you know. Helped Isaac with his algebra assessment, tick. You know, got my work tasks done, tick. And then so it's a reminder of the things that I am doing, and I'm not always sort of, you know, looking through that negative lens. So yeah, 1, take it easy on yourself. 2, you know, I should take my own advice, but exercise. And I think more so to like be in touch with like nature and fresh air, and you know, just they talk about endorphins, you know, the releasing of endorphins. And although I don't exercise as much as I'd like to, and you know, then I feel real guilty when I see Will's skipping challenges, you know.
Hey.
But yeah, I have a really good feeling and a sense of achievement after I've exercised. You know, and so my encouragement is to do more exercise, but I'm going to take my own advice. And then the third thing is, somebody's always got it worse than you, right? And so I think, again, going back to I wouldn't say a negative mindset, but, you know, things can be overwhelming, and, you know, we're in this lockdown week 8 now. Yeah, you know, we think we have it hard, but then, you know, there are stories where you see them heaps out on the, you know, like the community pages, where people don't have food, people don't have access to transport, people don't have access to any devices, and their children haven't done any learning throughout this whole lockdown, you know. And so, yeah, it's just trying to be more appreciative and more grateful for our circumstances, and not dwelling on those bad things, but also then sort of putting yourself in a position to give to others as well, even if it's just a text, or, you know, of like a bit of aroha and support, you know. Yeah, just being of service. So yeah, that's my last little bit of advice. Somebody's got it worse than you.
Exactly. I must say that those advice have been echoed throughout the entire podcast episodes, from 1 to 4, basically on the 4th episode. Just to hear you from point 1 being to balance your time. I was talking to someone as important as a doctor, but Michelle Dickinson, as well as Micah, who's trying to balance time between work as well as their children. And then your second point, talking to Helen and David Tour, about reminding yourself the people. Yeah, I talked to David Tour and his lovely wife. And it was amazing. It was such a good opportunity to go watch their podcast. I will link it to you. But it was reminding you to broaden your mind, to go out there. There's something out there outside. Don't forget that you need to flex those flex those brain muscles as well as your physical muscles. And then finally, as Helen Tua said, is that help those who was unfortunate. Make it a task for you to help them out, because no matter how much advice you give, they might need help more than anything. So I love that. It's awesome. It all comes back into this episode. It's an awesome thing. We're talking about the importance of vaccines and whatnot. We had a talk just not too long ago, even just yesterday, about a certain situation in terms of your family and COVID, and I was just wondering if you could share your thoughts on that situation, if you're willing to share it, because you've shared amazing stories throughout the entire podcast. This one will be interesting because we want to hear from a perspective of that person, and especially in the family in that situation, so we can get a clearer insight. So please do share if you can, of course.
Yeah. So yesterday, my little sister was diagnosed with COVID-19, and it was a bit of a scare for our whānau because, you don't really. It's not so surreal until it actually happens to somebody you know, and that somebody you know is actually like your direct whanaunga, your sister. So, so she was diagnosed, and she was then moved into managed isolation immediately. So I'll probably need to get her permission to share this. I'm sure she won't mind, but she hasn't. I wouldn't say she's an angel. I think there had been a couple of instances where she'd caught up with her whānau or friends, and then sort of contracted COVID-19, and so everybody was telling her to, my brother, my aunties, uncles, cousins, everybody's telling her, don't you bloody go out and get COVID-19 and bring it back to the whānau. And sure enough, what happened? So I'm sure she's feeling guilty. Because the impact is much wider than she anticipated. So it's not just our whānau. So we've just been tested and we're waiting our results.
Yeah.
But it's our whānau, all those people that we've engaged with. My partner's been off to mahi, and my mum's been off to mahi, and now her whole job, they've had to shut down business for a few days until everybody gets tested. And so, people will go without pay, businesses will go without money because of the sort of the actions of one person. But, she's young, she's still a minor.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I won't hold that against her. We're all human and we all make our mistakes.
Yeah.
But I suppose it's just, again, like this whole COVID thing is really creating a lot of division within our communities and within our whānau. But my heart goes to her more than anything, because I know that she'll be feeling that guilt. But also too, she's alone. She's now going to be isolated from our whānau, and although we have, thank goodness we have technology, so we can messenger call her. It's a scary time. So, my role as the big sis is to, just to, give her a call and uffy her and support her, and, and not hold her to her mistakes and not condemn her for the things that she's done, but help to provide sort of insight and guidance, and from a loving perspective. So, so that's my role. And, but our whānau at the moment, I think we're okay. We're not showing any symptoms or anything.
That's good.
And so hopefully it hasn't gone too far. Hopefully they've caught it early enough for, us not to be impacted. But, it is what it is, but
absolutely.
We're all good.
Thank you so much, Aayla. Thank you for giving us the time to hear you out and your thoughts and your amazing story. And again, I'm going to keep saying thank you. So again, thank you so much.
Cool, Vinnie. Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me to this cool podcast. It's my first one. And Will's been telling me to do my own, but I'm I'm still learning. So yeah, cool. I thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and it's nice to connect with you and chat and, like the old days.
Absolutely. And that is us from Southside Korero. Kia ora.
Southside.